I lost count decades ago of how many once-in-a-lifetime opportunities I've buried friends over. Real friends. Men I drank with, men I did business with, men who stood up at my wedding. Most of them didn't lose their shirts gambling or drinking. They lost it believing a sentence that sounds perfectly reasonable the moment somebody says it to you. This time it's different. 74 years old, and I want to tell you about the year I watched grown men I respected turn into strangers over a few dot-com stocks with catchy names and no earnings behind them. Money went up so fast for 2 straight years that people I'd call sensible started acting like they'd personally invented gravity. Then the year 2000 arrived, and the same market that made them feel like geniuses erased nearly 80% of the value on the technology exchange within months. Less than half the companies that existed before the crash were still standing after it. I watched men lose millions between one phone call and the next. My own money took a hit too, and I half expected it, which tells you something about how obvious the warning signs actually were the whole time. Here's the uncomfortable part. The internet really was the next big thing. Everybody chasing it wasn't wrong about that. They were wrong about the price they were willing to pay to be early. And I'm sitting here at 74, watching the exact same electricity in the room again, except this time it isn't called the internet. It's called artificial intelligence. And before you decide old Ryan's just a bitter man scared of new things, let me walk you through what I'm actually seeing, and then you can make your own mind up. Let's start with something most of you don't realize you're already exposed to, whether you've ever bought a single individual stock in your life or not. 7 companies, count the tech giants everyone's heard of, now make up something close to 1/3 of the entire American stock market index. If you own a broad index fund, thinking you're being sensible and diversified, you're still riding on the back of those same 7 horses more than you'd probably like to admit, and every single one of them is currently locked in an arms race to win at artificial intelligence, throwing money at it in numbers that don't feel real when you say them out loud. Add up what those 7 companies alone are pouring into AI infrastructure this single year, and you land somewhere north of $300 billion. That's not a company's revenue. That's more money than the entire yearly economic output of a country like Portugal, spent by 7 firms in 12 months, on data centers, chips, and computing power. Zoom out further, and the analysts expect global AI spending to double toward $500 billion within the next year or two, with the electricity alone needed to run all of it climbing toward $3 trillion annually by the end of the decade. I've never in my life seen an industry burn cash at that speed without eventually having to answer for it. Now here's a memory that's been sitting with me since the 80s, and it belongs right here. I once watched 2 men I knew go into business together, flipping the same used forklift back and forth between 2 companies they both owned, each time booking it as a sale on their books to make their revenue numbers look better before a loan application. Technically legal, morally filthy. And it worked for about 18 months before the bank finally asked why nobody's warehouse actually had a working forklift in it. I think about those 2 idiots every time I look at what I'm about to show you happening, at a scale of hundreds of billions of dollars instead of one second-hand forklift. One of the biggest AI companies took investment from a major software firm. It turned around and paid a huge chunk of that money straight back to the same firm to rent their data centers. That software firm then used the money to buy chips from the leading chip maker, and the chip maker turned around and invested billions right back into the original AI company. Every single leg of that circle gets booked as revenue somewhere, which makes every company's numbers look stronger than they'd look if the money had just sat still. It's not identical to my 2 forklift friends, but it rhymes closely enough that it keeps me up some nights. Let me put it in plainer terms, because the layers of this thing are designed to make your eyes glaze over, and I don't think that's an accident. One company sells the shovels, another provides the land, a third digs the quarry. All 3 of them are quietly helping each other lure more prospectors into the mine, and as far as I can tell, not one of them has actually struck gold yet. Everybody's getting richer, on paper off everybody else's spending, and paper wealth built that way has a habit of turning back into paper the moment one link in the chain gets nervous. And the chip maker in the middle of all this, I won't pretend I'm not impressed by them, because I am. Their stock has climbed somewhere in the range of 16 times its value since this whole chase began. They sell chips to nearly every major player in the game, and then they turn around and invest straight back into the same companies buying those chips. That's not illegal. It's just worth noticing that you're watching a company effectively fund its own customers to keep buying its own product. I've never once seen that arrangement stay clean forever. Here's the number that ought to worry you more than any of the flashy ones. One of the most talked about AI companies in the world is valued at somewhere around $500 billion, while pulling in roughly $12 billion in actual revenue and losing money every single month it operates. I've sat across the table from young entrepreneurs my whole career pitching me numbers that exciting, and I've learned the hard way that excitement and profitability are two entirely different animals that don't always show up to the same party. So will they ever grow into those valuations? It's not impossible. These companies have real levers still sitting unpulled. Hundreds of millions of people are using these tools every single week, which means an enormous pile of attention and an even bigger pile of data about how we all think and shop and talk. The day advertising gets woven directly into your conversation with one of these tools, recommending products the way it currently recommends facts, the money could arrive faster than anyone's currently modeling. And there's a second, quieter bet running underneath all of it. These companies are betting that once a business becomes dependent on their tools to function, that business will keep paying almost any price rather than rip the system back out. That's the oldest trick in commerce, dressed up in a new coat. But there's a wall coming that none of the spending in the world can simply buy its way past. And it's the one thing that makes me genuinely uncertain how this plays out. These systems learned everything they know by devouring nearly the entire written record of human civilization. And estimates suggest they'll have consumed almost all of the usable public material online within the next couple of years. Centuries of books, research, arguments, and mistakes fed into a machine inside a single decade. Once that well runs dry, the easy gains stop being easy. Humans don't hit that same wall because we don't just learn from reading. We learn from living, from conversations nobody transcribed, from mistakes nobody wrote a paper on. I could throw every tool available at one of these machines, and it still couldn't produce this exact video because it hasn't lived a single day of the 74 years I have. Whether these companies find a way past that wall with a fundamentally different kind of learning, or whether progress simply grinds slower than the market's currently pricing in, that's the real question sitting underneath every headline about this technology. So, is it exactly the dot-com crash all over again? No, and I want to be fair about that before I finish. Those companies in the 90s were often selling nothing but a catchy name and a website. These companies are selling something with genuine daily use, genuine utility, a real and growing customer base. That's a meaningfully better foundation than what collapsed in 2000. But better foundation doesn't mean no bubble. I still count every classic warning sign sitting right there in plain view. Valuations running years ahead of profits. Revenue that flatters itself through circular deals. Two superpowers racing each other for dominance regardless of cost. And a data ceiling nobody's fully solved yet. I genuinely don't know if we're standing near the beginning of a decade-long boom or much closer to the end of one than anyone wants to admit. Nobody honest can tell you that with certainty, and I'd be lying to you if I pretended I could. Here's the one thing I'd add to this whole picture that I haven't heard a single other channel say plainly. Watch the job postings in your own industry over the next year, not the stock price. Layoffs get headlines, but the quieter signal is which roles simply stop being reposted when someone leaves. That tells you faster than any earnings call beats each age. So, knowing all that, what would I actually do with my own money sitting here at 74, having lived through this exact movie once before under a different title? First, I'd keep investing, steadily, automatically, into a broad low-cost index fund every single month, regardless of what the headlines are shouting that week. I did exactly that straight through the dot-com collapse. My account took a real beating for a stretch, and I don't regret a single dollar I kept putting in, because the market has clawed its way back from every collapse in its history, given enough patience to wait for it. The men who lost everything back then weren't the ones who stayed invested through the crash. They were the ones who'd borrowed money to chase it in the first place, and had nothing left to invest with once the bottom fell out. Keep your own house free of that kind of debt, and a crash becomes an opportunity instead of an execution. Second, put real effort into growing what you earn, not just what you invest. Your income is the fuel that lets you keep buying when everyone else is too scared to. A raise, a second skill, a bit of side work, all of it becomes far more powerful during a downturn than during a boom, because that's exactly when the bargains show up for the people who still have money left to spend on them. And third, spread yourself properly instead of betting everything on one very exciting story. My own money sits across shares, bonds, a bit of gold, some property, and yes, even a small slice in things I'm still not entirely sure I understand. Dividend-paying businesses in particular tend to hold up better than most when the mood turns sour, because they're still handing you real cash even while their share price is having a bad year. None of this is a prediction, because I gave up pretending I could predict markets around the same time I gave up trying to predict the weather with my bad knee. What I can tell you from a man who's actually lived through the last version of this exact story is that the bubble bursting, if it bursts at all, will not be the end of the world. It'll simply be the moment the people who understood what they were holding walk calmly toward the exit, everyone else is stampeding through in a panic. I'll leave you with the thing I actually told my own grandson when he asked me last month whether he should put his savings into one of these companies directly. I told him the honest answer isn't yes or no. It's that nobody, including the men running these companies, actually knows which decade we're standing in yet, the early one or the late one. So build your plan for both of them at once. Keep buying steadily enough that you're glad you started early if this runs another 10 years. And keep your debts low enough that you're not wiped out if it doesn't. That's not an exciting answer. It's the only honest one I've got after 74 years of watching every generation convince itself it finally found the exception to the rule. I'm Ryan. Keep your feet on the ground while everyone else is looking at the sky.